This is TWiT.
Leaping Computer brings us the news under the headline, Mozilla warns Germany could soon declare ad blockers illegal. Wow. Okay. So let's see what Bleeping Computer had to say first. Bleeping Computer wrote, a recent ruling from Germany's Federal Supreme Court, which is the initials are BGH, has revived a legal battle over whether browser-based ad blockers infringe copyright, raising fears about a potential ban of the tools in the country. They write, the case stems from online media company Axel Springer's lawsuit against IO, the maker of the popular AdBlock Plus browser extension. Axel Springer says that ad blockers threaten its revenue generation model and frames any modification of website execution inside web browsers as a copyright violation. This is grounded in their assertion that a website's HTML, CSS is a protected computer program and that an ad blocker intervenes in the in-memory execution structures, the DOM, the document object model, CSSOM, the rendering tree, etc., thus constituting unlawful reproduction and modification. Okay, now I'll interrupt here just to observe that this is clearly a reverse engineered legal theory, right? Rather than finding and following an existing law or precedent, since none existed, they knew what outcome they were seeking and proceeded to concoct a theory of the case that they would then be able to argue. It appears to be an argument that's not being immediately dismissed out of hand, however. Bleeping Computer continues writing, previously, this claim was rejected by a lower court in Hamburg, but a new ruling by Germany's Federal Supreme Court found the earlier dismissal flawed and overturned part of the appeal, sending the case back for examination. Mozilla's senior IP and product counsel, Daniel Nazer, delivered a warning last week, noting that due to the underlying technical background of the legal dispute, the ban could also impact other browser extensions and hinder users' choices. Nazer said, quote, there are many reasons, in addition to ad blocking, that users might want their browser or a browser extension to alter a web page, such as the need to improve accessibility, to evaluate accessibility, or to protect privacy. And I'll interrupt here again to say that Daniel's point is a good one, because by the same logic that Axel Springer is using in their suit, doing anything on the browser side to modify the browser's behavior to block, for example, any tracking would obviously fall under the same ruling. So if ad blocking were found to be unlawful, so would tracker blocking. Bleeping Computer said, following the BGH's ruling, Axel Springer's argument needs to be re-examined to determine if DOM, CSS, and bytecode count as a protected computer program and whether the ad blocker's modifications are unlawful. BGH's statement reads, quote, this is the Supreme Court in Germany, it cannot be excluded that the bytecode or the code generated from it is protected as a computer program and that the ad blocker, through modification or modifying reproduction, infringed the exclusive right thereto, unquote. While ad blockers have not been outlawed, Springer's case has been revived now, and there's a real possibility that things may take a different turn this time. Mozilla noted that the new proceedings could take up to a couple of years to reach a final conclusion. As the core issue is not settled, there is a future risk of extension developers being held liable for financial losses. Whoa. Okay. Imagine being held liable for the loss of revenue incurred from preventing oneself being tracked across the internet. As if trackers had the legal right to profit from tracking us. No, that's what this amounts to. This is the sort of horror that makes one want to send some money to the EFF. And, because they're always on our side for this kind of shenanigans. This cannot be allowed to happen. Bleeping Computer concludes, Mozilla explains that in the meantime, the situation could cause a chilling effect on browser users' freedom, with browsers being locked down further and extension developers limiting the functionality of their tools to avoid legal troubles. So this will certainly be a case for us to keep an eye on. Imagine what it would mean if all control is taken away from end users and any modification to a browser's default generic behavior that might threaten the revenue of any constituent of a browser's page delivery were to become outlawed. This would mean not only advertisers who we know track us as part of what they do, but also those whose entire profit model is based simply on surreptitiously tracking and violating the privacy of everyone who surfs the web. As we know, there are such people. 499 of them are registered in the state of California, we found out last week. And if this were the case, we would be powerless to swat them. And we wouldn't be given the tools legally because those tools would be outlawed. But then consider what else happens. DNS services that specialize in filtering our network's DNS lookups to keep our browsers from obtaining the IP addresses of any of these known trackers would also be in the crosshairs, because their actions would be limiting the profit of people who want to track us. By the same logic that Axel Springer's attorneys propose, DNS filters would be deliberately interfering with the operation of the code that browsers are trying to run. The argument being decided is that advertisers have the legal right to force users' browsers to do exactly what they want them to do without any modification. If that's the case, where does it end? As I noted, supporting the EFF may be our best recourse. But there's also the conundrum we've explored in the past of the fact that advertising has been proven to be the model that best supports the delivery of the web's content. In fact, as we know, advertising also supports the delivery of this podcast. The TWiT network would and could have never grown as it did back in its heyday of podcasting, were it not for the revenue generated by its advertising and its sponsors. And it would still not be what it is today, but for advertising. So there's also the ethical dilemma of ad blocking, right? We want the goodies, but we'd rather not see the ads that support them and arguably, support the people who are creating them. And this brings us back around to the realization that the greatest mega ad blocker ever conceived and created is the emerging success of AI. AI presents its users with exactly what they want, which is completely ad-free content that was originally obtained from almost always advertising-laced and supported websites. So how should we feel about that? It seems to me that if Axel Springer has any grievance, and they apparently do, it ought to be aimed now more contemporaneous or more contemporarily. What's the word I'm looking for? Contemporaneously. I don't know. Anyway, currently at the entire web's next generation grievance, which is AI. The revenue threat created by those web browsing users who may choose to block some ads when visiting websites pales in comparison to the threat posed by AI, which inherently eliminates the need for users to bother with search engines or for them to ever visit those websites and to be exposed to any of those annoying ads. As we noted last week, this is being driven by consumer desire and behavior, right? AI is doing what the people want. It's becoming insanely popular specifically because users can get website content summarized for them without any of the advertising material that went into supporting the creation and publication of its source material. There's never been what is effectively a more powerful ad blocker that, in its effect than AI. By explicit design, it completely strips all peripheral advertising from a website, plumbing and ingesting only that site's non-advertising content. We've talked in the past about how the use of ad blockers puts us into an uncomfortable ethical gray area. As individuals, we've talked about the need and desire to support the websites we rely upon while also wishing to bypass, since it's simple, easy, and automatic, the regular rectangular regions of the pages we visit filled with images, annoying images of jumping monkeys and banners flashing in our faces, screaming for our attention. If Germany's Supreme Court is thinking that perhaps we should be forced to look at the jumping monkeys and the flashing neon banners, what's it likely to think about AI that takes the content and leaves the ads in its wake? So, that's the court. But this also brings up a more immediate and personal question. If we find the ethics of ad blocking somewhat uncomfortable, why don't we find the ethics of using AI to be even more so? It may be, I guess it may have once been because it wasn't originally clear to us that AI functioned as the equivalent of a super ad blocker on steroids. Now we know it is. We've seen reports of sites' revenue dropping dramatically because people are no longer going there. So perhaps it's because someone else is doing the dirty work for us. We're not doing it ourselves. We're asking an AI service about something, and we're magically presented with the answers. So it's not our problem, despite the fact that we're using and supporting services that dramatically reduce the revenue of the sites they visit and obtain their material from. So I guess I could make a convincing case for Axel Springer and the German Supreme Court's concerns over ad blocking being too little and too late, especially if, as Mozilla notes, nothing would be expected to happen for several years in any event. Outlawing the use of ad blockers to force the appearance of advertisements won't matter if many fewer people are visiting the sites which are showing ads, and making websites even less appealing to visit by forcing those ads, which are likely to become even more intrusive and obnoxious, out of desperation, to be more in our face.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed these little highlights from our shows. We do a bunch of them, and they're all available on the web at twit.tv or right here on YouTube. You can even watch most of them live on YouTube. I'll tell you what, you'll see a link below, and if you would like, and I would like it, like and subscribe. Thanks so much for watching.
Secure.